This is the Self-Storage Podcast, where we share the knowledge and skills from the industry's leading investors, developers, and operators to help you launch and grow your self-storage business. I'm your host, Scott Meyers, and over the past 16 years, we have acquired, developed, converted, and syndicated over 2 million square feet of self-storage nationwide with the help of my incredible team at selfstorageinvesting.com, who has helped thousands of people achieve greatness in self-storage. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Self-Storage Podcast. I am your host, Scott Meyers. And yes, there's more than one way to create wealth in real estate. And just because I'm partial to self-storage, it doesn't mean I'm oblivious to the other asset classes. After all, I cut my teeth in single-family rentals, fix and flips, multifamily, office buildings, and industrial warehousing before I focused all my efforts on self-storage. And in the times we find ourselves in right now, where investors are reassessing their options, I thought I would bring in my good friends at Pip Stehlik and Monica Decker, who have invested in multiple asset classes, to discuss what they are seeing across the investment landscape and how they are reacting. Now, Pip has an MBA in business management and started his career in a family-owned grocery business. He helped lead and grow the company to over $17 million in gross yearly revenue with 250 employees, including a pharmacy and a franchise business. He then started his real estate investment career in 2002, and his investment portfolio includes lease options, renovations, commercial, Airbnb, and as a result of all his success, he was all along the way asked to mentor and train other students through various organizations and now for himself. And over the past 15 years, he has trained and mentored over 40,000 students in 18 different countries, and he truly believes what Zig Ziglar said, that if you help enough other people get what they want, you will get what you want. Monica Decker earned a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in community service before spending 15 years working as a mental health professional. Then, in 2008, she completed her first rehab project in Fayetteville, North Carolina, her personal residence, and it needed a lot of work before it could be sold. Well, she stumbled through the process without having any knowledge about rehabbing, contractors, supplies, or comps. Monica then discovered Robert Kiyosaki's education company in 2011 and began her financial revolution and transition into real estate investing, and in just 2 short years, she was inducted into the Rich Dad International Hall of Fame. And in 2016, she began consulting for Robert's company as a trainer, mentor, and coach. Monica has extensive expertise in single-family and multifamily buy and hold, property management, lease option, wholesale, creative deal structure, and business processes. Monica resides part-time in the Los Angeles area and Puerto Rico with her husband and children. So without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Pip and Monica. Monica and Pip, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Well, thanks so much for taking, once again, time out of your busy schedules. And what I'd like to do right now is we've given everybody a sense of what you've done in the past and in your bio. So if you would, can each of you kind of catch us up to speed as to what you're doing now, especially in light of this different real estate game that we find ourselves in at the moment? And Monica, we'll start with you.
Okay, perfect. So I've been hanging out in lovely Puerto Rico. We went down there actually after the hurricane to do some project and construction management for FEMA and PREPA and to kind of get Puerto Rico back on its feet again. And I've come together with a great group of guys. I'm the only female in that group at the moment, other than their lovely, charming wives, to really take us to the next level. We all have similar mindsets. And so we came together back in January to take all of our businesses to the next level. And we've been looking at anything from residential assisted living facilities. This is all, we were exploring things before COVID and kind of, coming into different and bizarre times. Residential assisted living in Florida, the single family side of things is still really popular. We've been trying to diversify what kind of tenants we put in, for anything, predominantly trying to look at Section 8 tenants that, is guaranteed rent throughout these times because we just didn't know how things were going to go. I'm still exploring the fix and flip side of things. My background yields well to that. I've done remote projects all over the country. So that's primarily what I focus on, was, big chunks of cash through rehabs and repositioning on all asset classes and then deploying that money to passive side of things and my rentals. So I'll let Pip elaborate on that a little bit more.
Well, I've been investing for 18 years now, since 2002. And so been doing this a long time, seen a lot of different markets over that time, Scott. And I also had the opportunity to teach a lot of people. I've been teaching real estate investing in 18 different countries over the last number of years. So been all over the world. And what I see is everybody's always looking for the same type of investment, which is something that's as passive as possible. And even though my background is not in storage facilities, I have tons of questions from students that I've seen over the years in doing so, and have been keeping up with people that I've always worked with. And what I've found is that as long as there's a good deal, money will follow it. And what we're finding right now is there's a lot of fear in the marketplace with the COVID stuff that's going on. And even though we came together before COVID, we knew that there were strengths in numbers. And even though my wife and I have been doing this for a long time, it's like anything. If we can find other people that have the same value system as us, the same integrity that we have, obviously the same goals, the same mindset, and we can partner with them, we can move a lot faster as a team. And so I think if you collectively look at Burbank, which is our company name, Burbank Companies, we have well over 100 years of practical experience and a lot of different backgrounds. I'm sure you've heard, Monica's background is like my wife, Jennifer. They're more in the social services background and the people side of it, the personality stuff. Monica's husband, Chuck, he's a military background. My background even doesn't say it in the bio. I actually cut my chops in stand-up comedy for 7 years. So that's a totally different side of things. One of the guys that we have in our group is a pharmacist. So he has his doctorate. And so we've got a lot of different variations in the group of people that we brought together. We've brought a Canadian into our group. His business background is all through family-owned businesses. And then we've got one gentleman named Dan in our group that his background is in theology. So we start to see a lot of strengths and stuff with different people that we have in our group. And we just know that we can obviously make a lot stronger presentation as a group than we can individually. So as far as, Monica talked about the types of stuff that we've been doing. One thing she didn't mention is, and I'm a big fan of, and a couple of the other guys in our group are, something called lease options. I know that as in storage facilities, you don't have to worry about the tenants and the trash and all those different problems that you generally have to in a typical type of residential property. Well, one of the things that we do with lease options is we get owners in our properties instead of tenants, so they take care of the trash, they take care of the toilets and all that kind of stuff, so we don't have to. So we like to try to marry up the best of those scenarios, like lease option, with a traditional residential property and get a benefit for both. So I agree. I've done lots of rental properties in my life, and tenants and trash and all those kinds of things can be a big problem, which the storage facilities, minimize that to a very small extent. And so as long as we can, I think, with our real estate backgrounds, encompass those types of mindsets and attitudes, we can be successful in any different forms of real estate that we want to do.
Well, and again, that's the reason why I'm so happy that we were able to connect on this podcast, because I've also been in single family homes, as you know, and apartments, and then office buildings, and looking at all asset classes, much like yourselves. And through our mutual friend, Kurt, who got us in touch with each other to see what kind of synergies there are, since you educate folks, we educate folks, we invest in different asset classes, although I'm, heavily skewed towards self-storage, whereas you're still more diverse in your holdings. Now it's just a really good time to get together and to introduce to everybody here, some of the different strategies that you're deploying as you're seeing through COVID and the oncoming recession. There's always a shift in the economy, which creates a shift in how we invest in real estate and ways of doing things. And so and we'll dive into that in a minute, Pip, in terms of the strategy. But Monica, I want to come back to you, because I just recently had learned that there are some huge advantages to investing in Puerto Rico from a tax standpoint, as long as you live there, I believe, and or your business is located there. So I just had to ask, was that strategic, or is it just the weather? Give us a little idea as to what landed you down in Puerto Rico.
No, it's a little bit of both. I actually had a great friend who was an educator for us as well. And he kept telling me, he's Puerto Rican. He kept telling me, you got to go to Puerto Rico. You got to move there. You got to understand the benefits. And I really didn't until we went there under, providing contract services, and really to explore that. So yes, it has, that's why we're still there, because we're not, doing project and construction management. That ended. However, we chose to stay there due to the tax benefits and what it's known as Act 20 and Act 22. And last year it got changed, and it took Act 20, Act 22, and all of these other acts tax decrees that got passed, and they rolled it into Act 60. And so what it basically is on the Act 20 side, if you have your company headquarters there and you export services, that can be a multitude of things. There's a whole list from, project management to centralized management. Let's say you have all these rentals and your location, your headquarters is managing them out of Puerto Rico, then you're only taxed at 4%. The Act 22 side of thing is for the individual investor. So that is what ties me to the island 6 months and a day. And it basically states that any capital gains on your more passive investments, distributions, dividends, if I'm invested in crypto and crypto goes on a run, and I have huge gains from that, then I pay 0% capital gains. I can flip and reposition, homes on the island, and that would give me 0 capital gains there as well. So yeah, it is a multitude of things. I live in a great community with some top influencers, podcasters, Amazon drop shippers, anything and everything is in my community, because they are taking advantage of these tax incentives that exist in Puerto Rico. So yeah, it's why we're hanging out and continuing to stay there. But outside the weather, have great weather. That is pretty much the view off my porch, even though that's not a real picture. That is the view off my porch right now. So yeah.
Well, thanks for breaking that down, Monica. And yes, there's a couple of podcasters. And again, I just started on a podcast that I was featured on recently, which made me look into it. And they delve down a little bit more for passive investors as well, not only active investors and syndicators, but also on the passive side, mostly for the capital gains, as you mentioned. So good for you. So Pip, then I wanted to circle back to you and talk about, in your bio and obviously in your career, you and your company have invested in across multiple asset classes. So as you've, been doing this for 18 years, so going like myself, going on the third recession, how does that change what you're doing right now, and how are you pivoting or at least adapting to the environment we find ourselves in right now?
Well, I think what we always have to understand in any recession, and obviously, Scott, you've been doing this a while too. If you've never seen a recession, there's just a huge amount of fear in everybody. It could be the investors, it could be the tenants, it could be people buying houses, homeowners, it could be builders, things like that. And even though there's a recession, people are still making money in a recession, and I think there's even more opportunity. One of the things, and I don't care if it's storage facilities, if it's an apartment building, or if it's a single family house, there's got to be capital raised to buy those types of things. And I think one of the things we find in a recession is that even though the stock market is just continue to go higher and higher and higher, I think there will be a lagging indicator on that eventually where we'll see a little bit of a correction. Who knows? We may not. But those people that have their money in there, if there is a correction like we saw in 2008 or 2002, that money's going to want to go into different asset classes, things like property, storage facilities, and things like that. So I've seen that happen a couple of different times. But what I've also seen is the motivation of the sellers, because what we know is if it's harder to get a traditional loan, then the sellers, when they're selling whatever property they're selling, whether it's a storage facility or a single family house or anything in between, is the buyers are having problems getting traditional financing. So the sellers have to be a lot more creative in helping us get into that property if they want to sell it. There's less buyers in the market in a down market, so we have less competition. So we can get better prices, better opportunities. And so I've always thought that in a down market, that gives us opportunities. And I go back to, and I know I got it behind me here because this is what I teach and preach on a regular basis. I was taught by Robert Kiyosaki himself in 2007 to go around the world and teach real estate training. And he talks so much about when laws change, when markets change, opportunity arises. The educated investor is allowed to do different things that the uneducated investor cannot do. And the uneducated investor in a down market, they basically bury their head in the sand, whereas we, as educated investors, no matter what our asset class is, can take advantage of that. And when we also are able to do in those down markets is show people that maybe have been scared to keep their money in a certain type of market, how we can still pay them a nice return, and it can be constant with the cash flow that we get on our passive income.
So So clearly, you're using investor capital, passive investors in your projects and syndicating a number of your businesses. Tell us, if you would, either one of you can take this question. Tell us what that looks like, I guess, post-COVID or since March. How have you had to change that side of the business and pivot? Are you finding it easier? Are you finding more people wanting to come into hard assets that produce income versus the stock market? Give us a sense of what that's looked like since March for your companies.
You want to go? Go ahead, Monica.
I think there's huge opportunity out there. I've met with, many financial planners that have been in that industry forever. And, they will, if they're on the open-minded side of being an investor themselves too, then they're saying, oh my gosh, people have pulled funds and they're sitting on the sidelines looking for opportunities. This is a massive time for people to be raising money, and it can come very easily if you show them, that it's a safe project, that they can get their money back, maybe not so much worried about the return on investment as much as the return of investment, right? So, hitting those points and addressing them, I think there's huge opportunity out there from a syndication side to put together multiple funds to do different things, from the residential assisted living that's on the uprise because of the baby boomers and retirement and all of those things that are occurring over the next 20 years, to the single family movement that we're going to have with all the forbearances and foreclosures that I think are probably going to come out of this and have those opportunities. So it's safeguarding that capital. And I think a lot of people have taken their money off of Wall Street because they just got really shocked in April. My father-in-law, 30%, it dropped overnight, and then he's earned it back. But I still think we're in for unknown times with, elections and things like that happening, that the economy is going to shift. And I think people are aware of that. And I think there's huge opportunity sitting on the sidelines right now. It's just tapping into those people, finding them, and then educating about, hey, there are other opportunities that, yeah, real estate, it goes up and down too. But as long as we can hold on to it 7 to 10 years and ride it through those market cycles, it's going to, come back.
Mm-hmm. So, Pip, have you been involved? Have you done any capital raises or any funds, or just securing more investor capital during this time? And if so, let's get into the specifics of what that has looked like. Has it been any more difficult, or is it a tougher sell right now, or
I think,
how's that? How have you found it?
I think what we're starting to see or what we've seen since March, and this is my personal, with our Burbank companies, is that I actually think I've been shocked, a little surprised. The market took a big dip in April, but then it's back now at all-time highs. And so I'm surprised by that. Now, I know the stock market isn't a leading indicator. It's more of a lagging indicator as to what's going on. And all the indices that you see, they're just a small portion of all the companies that are out there. I think if you take the top 5 or 6 companies, the Amazons, the Google, and some of those, they're up significantly, but the S&P as a whole is at a little bit of a flat, or actually down if you look at it, if you took those 5 or 6 big companies out of it. So what I'm seeing personally is people are a little scared right now. They're holding on to their money. I think it's been tougher to raise the capital. That's my 2 cents on that. And I think it's because there's just this recession that we haven't even had yet. We've been talking about it for a while, but technically we really haven't had much of a recession. If we are, we're just in the very beginning of it. So I think people are sitting there, as Monica just said, waiting on the sidelines a little bit. But I also think what's happening is there's a lot of federal money being pumped into the economy right now that are giving us some false positives that maybe once those things stop, I mean, you look at some of these industries like the airline or travel industries, the cruise industry, hotels, all that kind of stuff. I mean, and you can see it coming with, the United Airlines, the American Airlines, the Deltas, 30,000, 20,000, 30,000 different employees in each of these companies. Once October 1 hits, they're gone, which is going to give us all more opportunities in multiple different spaces. But I think the last few months have been harder than I thought it would be, just because I think either people are more scared, there's a lot more unknown, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but I think more than anything, there's a lot of, and I don't know what you want to call it, federal money being pumped in that have given people a little bit of a false sense of security that eventually is going to go away. And I think that's going to lead us to have even more opportunities, but it's been a little tougher, I think, from March to whenever these federal monies are going to fall off to be able to raise some of that capital. I would think it's been a little bit more of a challenge than I thought it was going to be, Scott.
Spot on, and that's exactly what we're experiencing as well. And my same thought patterns in the beginning. We thought that once the stock market took a tumble, that people would be coming off their cash. They had to put it somewhere, and with a whole bunch of 401ks sitting out there from middle managers that were let go, now they had the ability, because they were no longer with those companies, to be able to move them into self-directed IRAs and would begin wealth building again, or perhaps investing for cash flow to replace a lost income. Highest unemployment we've ever seen. And as you mentioned, we're at just tip of the iceberg once October comes. And to your point, Monica, we're going to see all the money that has been pumped in and has kept things moving along and foregoing evictions and what have you. Yeah, those the forbearances are just we're not too far off from that, and people will be consolidating, and I think that'll benefit single family rentals, and it certainly benefits self storage when people are consolidating and moving in with each other, moving back home with the parents, whatever that looks like. Anytime we have a recession, self storage benefits from that as well. But to that point, this is uncharted territory, and I think that we found ourselves in a position where it's just a little harder to get people off of their cash right now. So all that said, let's talk about just market sectors right now. Again, self-storage it's our gig. That's my game. That's what we're in right now. Have been in the other asset classes, and never say never. But what specific strategies or asset classes are you looking to get more involved in, or strategies to deploy as we get further on down, say for the rest of this year and into next, if you're willing to share?
Well, we've explored a lot of right before COVID, actually, we left Miami area early because we were really diving in deeper on residential assisted living. That was just a trend that I know is coming, that we're facing. I know the stats on it. When COVID hit, I said, let's talk about what our new norm looks like. And, being skittish of market renters and not having the ability to evict them. I'm still dealing with that. I've had 3 continuances on a property in St. Louis. And even if I got judgment against that tenant, then the sheriff's not there to deliver the paperwork and get them out. So what is our safest clientele? Right now, I truly believe that that's a Section 8 client where the government is paying those bills. Any friends or people that I have that are heavily invested in, single family rentals or, on up to the quads that have Section 8, their money's being deposited. It hasn't stopped. Whereas some of the other rentals that I hold, that I have market renters in there, my monies have stopped, and I don't have the legal, the legal entity behind me to get them out of the way right now. So there's just the unknown certainties around that. So that's a stance that, I really wanted to be, and I still tell students to this day, if you can put Section 8 in there, I think that's the best solution for you right now, because there are unknowns with market renters, and when the court systems are going to open back up and allow things to happen that need to happen. So you may be sitting on a property for 6 months without payment. Can you handle that? So just looking at the alternatives, and even with the VAs and some social housing where, we're talking actively to the Veterans Department of Corrections. Those are some of the, agencies that, we're exploring with students as well as ourselves to develop those relationships, because they are still paying too. So people exiting, the prison system, women transitioning that need that kind of housing, they're still paying their bills as well as Section 8. So those are some of the more, client, tenant bases that we've been focused on, just because that safety factor right now.
Well, yeah, you can get real fired up about an asset class, and it may be sexy to you, but the approach is to make sure that the rent is getting paid, and to get into that sector in which you can ensure that as much as possible. So I agree with that approach, and I think that strategy serves you much, much better. So Pip, what would you add to that, or change in how we're looking at things?
a couple of things that, I mean, I come from old school, and there's a quote that I've used forever: when in doubt, wholesale it out. So wholesale assignments, no matter what the market's doing, up, down, sideways, good market, bad market, high price market, any market, you have the opportunity, if you're educated the right way, to get something under contract and assign a contract for a profit. And that works anywhere and everywhere, no matter what. It works with unlisted properties. It works with properties on the MLS. If you just know those strategies, you can work out a win-win situation. I'm personally doing, that within our company in different markets. I live in Kansas City, so I've been doing that in markets that are, within a short, geographical area where I'm at. So Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Lincoln, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, Iowa, Little Rock, Wichita, those kinds of markets, because there's all kinds of opportunities there. The one thing that I think, and this is, I always believe everything kind of happens for a reason. And I reached out to Kurt to catch up on some old stuff. And I know he's your director of education and stuff. And what was interesting when I reached out to Kurt, I wasn't even in the space of self-storage. And so to get to learn more a little bit about what you guys do, Scott, has been really interesting to me, because one of the things I think is really going to change is, and I'll give you a perfect example. The room that I'm in right now was all, not in a specific office space. And we took some stuff out of here. It was kind of a spare bedroom kind of thing that we had here. And so just the fact that almost every business is going to have more of this component where we're working from home, meaning there's not going to be as much need for big commercial spaces like there was, office spaces. I think that's going to change exponentially. But what's also going to help in the storage facility game is the fact that I had to make room for what I didn't have here with lights and everything else 2 or 3 months ago. Didn't even think about this before March. This was not even on my radar screen. And now my business partners want to call this Pip's basement, because I'm in the basement, but that's just because my wife sends me down here to get her out of her hair. But the point being is, we're all going to have home office space. And which means that space has got to come from somewhere, and there's stuff there that needs to be stored other places. So I think, it just marries up well. And I think there's obviously a reason Kurt and I got back in touch with one another, and it's led us to being on a podcast with you today, Scott. And so I truly believe that's why everything happens in life, is there's a reason for it happening. And I see a lot of synergies, the more I've talked to obviously Kurt, and then the more we talk with you, Scott.
Well, and I appreciate that, Pip. And you're spot on. Again, we've seen in the storage industry at the beginning of all this, the kids came home from college early, and then no sign of them going back. So everything came into storage earlier than we had expected, and even more than we had expected. Then the businesses that were immediately shut down with the shelter in place, well, they just had to close their doors. And those that were renting our own buildings, then excess inventory and, office, everything, furniture and everything went into storage. And then when the balance of the businesses that are still open sent everybody home, we had one, sometimes two wage earners that were relegated to the basement or to the dining room or to a spare bedroom, and everything else had to go to make way for an office. And we're still not done with that. I think everybody's still in a wait and see and a holding pattern. And so, so when the other shoe drops, if you will, or just when we get into maybe a long-term scenario, there's a reason why the co-working spaces and the WeWorks and all those other folks, they're gone. And I don't know that they'll ever come back. They may to a degree. We sold our last office building last month. Thank God. That was good timing. And that was certainly more of a blessing. And thank you, God, rather than any foresight on my part, that's for sure. And one of our projects that was a combination of co-working space and self-storage is, we went back to the drawing board and back to the city. And now it's looking like it's going to be more industrial and storage and a little bit of co-working space. So yes, we do have to pivot. But I wanted to go back to one of the points that you talked about, Pip, and obviously wholesaling. And so we've got, I shouldn't say obviously, but we do wholesaling as well in commercial projects. And for myself, my students, associates, if we get really good at what we should be doing, which is, marketing, filling our funnel full of opportunities to evaluate and underwrite, we should have more, and then we can do. And so to be able to, and we certainly don't want them to fall off our desk and go nowhere or to somebody else. And so to wholesale those and putting together a packaging offer memorandum and then bring it out to our community is what I continue to preach over and over. And many folks are doing that. But I think some folks are maybe a little scared, or perhaps just don't feel it's a good use of their time, even though they can make, instead of with a single family, which nothing to sneeze at, $5, $7, $10, $30,000 a pop. But when you're talking commercial, we've seen over $1 million, or right anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million in terms of a wholesale fee or a referral fee. So if you would share a little bit about how you teach your folks, or what you've done in terms of putting forth a commercial property for wholesale. What does the offering memorandum look like, or a package look like to send out to folks?
Well, it's one of two things. If the property's already listed, which I've done that as well, if it's listed on the MLS as a multiple listing property, there's usually all of the material provided. So you don't have to do a lot of the groundwork. The realtors or the sellers have already put together a memorandum of all this information. And all we're basically in that instance is another source of marketing for them. Just like anybody that you're going to be working with, you've got a database of people that you know that somebody else may not know. And there's a database that maybe hasn't been informed that this property is even on the market. Because a lot of times your commercial properties, they won't go on the MLS because sellers don't want their tenants to know, or there's leases in place that gets a little more complicated. So I think what we have to look at in both situations, as long as your offering memorandum, as you call it, prospectus, whatever words you want to use, we just have to be able to show it's a win-win situation for both parties. And the thing that I think we're starting to see right now, and the pressure points or the motivation points are going to change. What I've always found out about wholesaling, it's just a matter of being in front of people and letting them know you're always interested. You're always there to buy. I learned that from my dad when I was a little kid in the grocery business. Everything's for sale for the right price. And I think even the kids, my brothers and I, were for sale if the price would have been right, that kind of mentality. So everything's always for sale. And so as long as you're in front of people and you're constantly letting them know that you're willing to buy, you're willing to help facilitate deals, their motivation may not be there on September 1 or September 2, whatever the day is. But by the time we get to December or January, as long as you know, or they know that you're there, their motivation may change a lot because of many other factors that you don't even know. I'm working on buying a steel company out of South Carolina right now. Has that deal gone through? No. I've been working on that since April or May of this year. It has nothing to do with the real estate side of it. In fact, I don't even want the real estate. I want the cash flow from the steel company. But the problem is the motivations changed a little bit because in that time frame, one of the owner's parents has passed away. And so what they thought was going to happen back in May didn't happen. But we think the motivation is going to get even higher once they get through all the unfortunate things that happen when a close relative passes away. And so it's just interesting to see that they know that we're there. Whenever they're ready, we're there. Now, did I ever even think of buying a steel company a year ago? No, but you just keep networking with people and you keep putting things in place. And the process to buy anything, steel company, storage facility, single family house, has really got a lot of similarities. We're always looking at the numbers. We're looking at the cash flow. And then we're looking at, how do we get the money to do it? And can we pay the investors a nice return? And if we can do all of those things, the goal for this the steel company, it's a $20 to $22 million play. They think it's 23. We think it's 23 or 20 million. So we're going to meet probably somewhere in the middle on that if everything goes through. The point being is, as long as we can get the financing for that, we're going to come up with that deal. It looks like no money out of pocket if everything follows through. So it doesn't matter, I don't think, what the type of property is, the business is that you're looking at. A lot of these principles are the same, and that we're buying cash flow and we've got those assets. Now, I know somebody's going to ask me, why am I not worried about the real estate if I'm in the real estate game? The steel facility is in a small podunk town outside of Columbia, South Carolina. It's about 30 minutes from Columbia, South Carolina. And in the town, I believe, is 1,800 people. So as well as I do, if that steel facility is not in that property in in small town South Carolina, there's not a lot of other needs for a 30,000 square foot building in a town that has no population.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think the property has a lot of value. The business has a boatload of value. And so I think, and maybe I'm sure you know this, Scott, more than anybody, there's so many of these big old Walmart facilities that are just sitting in these population centers, maybe not being used or underused, that are probably not ever going to be another retail facility, especially after what's happened in the last 6 months. But there's other opportunities that you can repurpose them for. And I think storage facilities are a huge opportunity in some of those regards.
And they are. We're looking at a whole lot of retail and big boxes that are going dark, as they have been, as Amazon takes over the world. And ironically enough, now what we're seeing is that we are competing with Amazon because their big push over the past couple of years is becoming more and more of a regional distributor, even coming to be a local distributor. So of those companies that they put out of business, we are now competing with them for that space to put in a storage facility, which is making it interesting. But there's a lot of retail that's going by the wayside and a lot of opportunities out there. But one of the other points I wanted to touch on that you had mentioned, Pip, is that like any investment, we all know that the money is made when we go into it. And if you're a wholesaler, or even if you're not, if wholesaling is one of your strategies, one of the arrows in your quiver, you tend to have an eye towards looking at every opportunity as if, if I can't follow through with plan A, which is to ride this thing out for 5 years and stabilize it, I better be able to wholesale it. So, Monica, you look at a lot of different types of properties and in multiple asset classes. Maybe if you could share, what are some of the disciplines? What are the must-haves in terms of a deal like that? Say, I have to be able to wholesale it, or I have to double my money. What are some of the safeguards or buffers that you put in place when you look at a project to say it has to have this, or I'm not moving forward no matter what?
Really, it all boils down to the numbers and our investment criteria. I think everyone has to have a set of money rules. And if you have your money rules and things that you live by that you have to have, I don't think it becomes a gamble. Then you don't get emotionally attached to a property and get into the wrong situation because you're emotionally attached to it. So I always, look at highest and best use. Anytime I'm with students in markets, we always look at highest and best use. What could this be? Could this, in California, we know most of the cities on the coast, they're not going to cash flow, but how can we make them cash flow? Well, highest and best uses. Hey, I have VA contacts out there that we go to, the Veterans Administration, and now we can put four beds per bedroom, and we can make those once non-cash flow properties cash flow. So we're always looking at highest and best use, but I think that each person needs to, come up with their own investment strategy and what they feel safe with. And I call them money rules. I make students tell me, what is your safety points? Some people are okay with $100 cash flow per door, but if this is your first investment property and you have a $3,500 sewer bill because your clay pipes, eroded and collapsed on them, are you going to be able to handle that if you're only getting $1,200? Have you factored that into your numbers? Because this is an older building. So I'm always processing through, know what's acceptable for you, because if that's your first rental property and it takes you out, you're going to hate rentals. You're never going to do another rental property because you didn't adequately assess. Now, did you bring in a partner to have those reserves? We need capital reserves to weather the COVID times, to weather the times where you don't have tenants. So I make sure that all of that is kind of in their thinking pattern so that they're aware of, $100 may seem great to you, but if things go really sideways, do you have the reserves and are the other things in place to carry you through those hard times? And let's also get down to highest and best use of the property. And so I make them analyze it a number of different ways before they move forward. Back in the day before COVID, was this a better Airbnb solution? We've taken some Airbnbs, would this be better purposed as an Airbnb? But let's have a plan A, plan B, plan C so that you can transition out of that. If the Airbnb isn't going your way, could we set that up to lease option and still bring down the capital that you need to survive in hard times? So it's really making them think differently in all different facets and when they look at the property. Not just one aspect of that property.
And as investors and educators, we tend to look at these in multiple ways. And yes, for our students, the same thing. We run into the same thing, and that is, I think many folks they set a goal to get into a project by the end of this year or their second one, and they begin to look at a project. And Pip knows where I'm going with this. And by God, they're going to make it happen and put a square peg in a round hole. And this one doesn't cash flow, but I'll make it up on the next one. And just which are some of the worst things that you could possibly hear as an educator. And you say no. Because to your point, Monica, you may lose the battle, and lose that first project, but sometimes you may lose the war too if it takes your credit out, and you're on the sidelines now for a while until you can rebuild again. So all good points. And I already know that we're going towards round two in our podcast because we're beyond our time here, and there's many avenues that we could go down because your experience and backgrounds are so diverse and varied and long. So what I'd like to do for this time around, until we can regroup, why don't you, if you would, share with the folks a little bit about where you may be doubling down right now, or even just words of wisdom for folks that are maybe sitting on the sidelines or wondering which direction to go. What are some of the things that you're seeing, or even some of those disciplines to put in place as we head into the next say 3 to 6 months?
I would say, we are actually looking in your space. I mean, we have a lead list of 700 leads right now, and some of those are self-storage. And getting into that realm, I've always loved it. I met you when I was a student coming up through, the various RIAs out in LA, and I loved your presentation. It was just, I was already wrapped in the apartment zone and the single family zone. So I didn't want to overwhelm myself anymore, but I loved your take on self-storage. So we do have active leads right now in the apartments, with apartments, single family, and on the storage side. Now, obviously we can get by in storage and we understand the numbers, but do we have the kind of expertise that you do? No. That's why I love the fact that there's synergy between us, and I actually get to learn some of that stuff where I know it, but I don't know it like you do. So we are actively in that space with lots of different asset classes. We've taken, even on the Airbnb side, residential assisted living. So we're pretty diversified in what we're looking at doing and achieving right now, and putting those things in place. Yeah.
Well, Monica, that was a perfect lead in. Thanks for serving up that softball. We do have a Self-Storage Academy coming up. And so to fill in the gaps, and as you're beginning to look at those, just kidding, folks. Monica, you are welcome at all times, and far advanced in your career, obviously, in real estate at this time. But any assistance, as you know, is going to be provided. But Pip, why don't you take a shot at it? Give us an idea of what you're looking at, and you can't just say we're being opportunistic, because that is not the case either.
I think the most important thing for all of us to exercise, and you talk about, I'm probably going to get hit by lightning when I say this, is we all need to exercise a little patience right now. Just because I've been saying that since March, and Monica's been on multiple calls with me with this patience thing, I do believe that the market will change, which is going to give us huge opportunities. I think the biggest opportunities for us, as far as Burbank goes, is going to be in some of the things that Monica was talking about with the commercial properties that are out there, and be multifamily commercial, not commercial retail or things like that. That's what we're looking at. We also think there's going to be some major opportunities in now I've lost my train of thought. That never happens. The assisted living facilities. I'm a little bit gun shy on the assisted living facilities because of what's gone on with COVID. I was so excited right before that happened, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, that might be the worst thing ever. So I'm not experienced in that space. Monica has a lot more experience than I do, so I'll have to defer to her. But I think, and then I've been on lots of podcasts in the last 3, 4, 5 months, and what I've tried to tell everybody, I mean, when you've been through a lot of stuff, seen multiple recessions, I think one of the things we have to realize is not to get too excited. I mean, it's great to have urgency. It's great to have the knowledge. I think it's always important to have the knowledge before you take that step. And a lot of people want to go take the step and try to learn it as they go. But I think what we see, and you said it a minute ago, Scott, was that, everybody wants that first property. I want that first deal. And they end up getting not the right deal. They get the first deal. And I'd rather have somebody, myself included, get the right deal and have it take a little bit longer than to get the wrong deal quickly. So I think that's what I would say as far as, parting shots would be, make sure right now that all the numbers line up, make sure that your investors are in place, and make sure that you've protected your investors. Zig Ziglar says it better than anybody. If you help other people get what they want, you're going to get everything that you want. And there's got to be a possession of all that kind of stuff. Your investor has to get what they want. You've got to get what you want. The seller needs to get what they want. If everybody synergizes in that way, everybody's going to win, and you're going to find the right deal. If only one person's winning out of the group, then somebody's losing, and you don't want that.
Yeah, there is, truly the win-win-win scenario always comes back to the forefront in this, because you're right. If somebody's losing, it means that either this was a very adversarial project and deal, and some bridges have been burned, or something is going to happen down the road that is a little bit worse than you had anticipated. So agree 100%. All right. Well, Monica and Pip, once again, thanks so much for your time. A little longer podcast than we normally do, and we haven't even scratched the surface. So we are definitely going to go to round 2, and appreciate your time. And also on the education side, we agree 100%. One of these deals can take you out. As you mentioned, Pip, you can do the numbers have to work, but if you don't know what the numbers are, how do you know if it is? You don't know what you don't know. And so many folks will hop onto some YouTube videos of yours and ours and think they've got it down. And there's a lot of content, there's a lot of information out there that people put out, but we act as many times the policeman of that information, making sure that it is correct for folks. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of content, a lot of information. You can download all that, but you can't download thoughtful mentoring. And so working with someone or some folks or an organization to get the proper education before you jump into an asset class or even into real estate, if you haven't, is money and time well spent. So with that, Monica and Pip, if you would give everybody your contact information, and if they want to get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about what you're doing, if you would, now's the time to share that.
All right, I'll go ahead and Scott, is it free to give emails and things like that where they can reach us?
Careful what you ask for and what you give out, but yes, completely up to you.
Okay. So I'm pretty free flowing with my students. They are respectful, and I've never had one that wasn't. So you can reach me at monica@burbankcompanies.com. Any questions or follow up about some of the things that we're doing. Our website is under construction right now with a revamp, with all the things that we're changing up in our business. So that's probably going to be released in about 3 more weeks. So just keep that in mind. So that's why you can feel free to reach me at that email address.
And you can get a hold of me at monica@burbankcompanies.com. No, you can get a hold of it's Pip, P-I-P. So I have the easiest name ever. It's the same forward and backward. It's pip@burbankcompanies.com. And I'm a big fan of making sure that there's support and somebody always there holding your hand. So I think that's the coolest part about anything that's delivered out there. And Scott, you already said it. You can get all the free information. I call it YouTube University that you want, but who do you ask questions to when you got a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's somebody holding your hand through that process, it's already been there. The fire is a lot less scary. The problems are a lot less hard to come across or hard to get across. And then there's always somebody there to bounce ideas off of.
Perfect. Yeah. Monica, Pip, once again, thanks so much for your time. Looking forward to round 2. So with that, for everyone else out there, feel free to contact Monica and Pip to learn a little bit more about Burbank Companies, and we will see you all on the flip side. Take care, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always. Now, we're going to be talking about topics like this that are on target for the times that we find ourselves in, so it is important that you are listening to this podcast every single week, because the guests that I'm going to be bringing on and the topics we will be covering are relevant to what we are all going through right now. And it's just going to get better and better and better in terms of the content that we're going to be discussing, and it's going to be more timely than ever. So please, make sure you subscribe to the show and make sure you're paying attention to these episodes as they are coming out during this period, as I am specifically going out and finding guests who are providing really valuable information you need right now. So thank you so much. We'll see you next week.